Hi there, welcome. My name is Christy and this is All Things Being Human. I am a registered psychotherapist and naturopathic doctor in Toronto, and this segment is conversations I've had with my clients. And today's conversation came out of exploring anxiety with someone, and all of a sudden, their face is kind of scrunching up a little bit, their eyebrows are furrowing, their head's tilting, and I'm realizing something's not landing here, something's going on. And I realize, right, we haven't really talked about why I might be asking about your physical experiences of anxiety or how your body is kind of holding that, how anxiety is manifesting in the body. And so we started to talk about why I would be asking those questions. Why would we be exploring that? And the answer to that question, it's helpful to have a little bit of an understanding of how our brain actually works. And so for this, I'm going to borrow Dan Siegel's hand model of the brain. Insert pun about handy tools here. If you were to imagine that this is your brain and this is your spinal cord, our brain has three primary processing levels, and it processes different kinds of information at each different level. So at the very base of our brain is our basal ganglia. This part of our brain processes sensory information, so felt sense experience. A level up from that, we have our limbic system. This includes our amygdala, our hypothalamus, our hippocampal complex, several structures. This area of our brain primarily processes emotion. And then one level up from that is our frontal cortex. This is our kind of logical brain. This part of our brain deals in thoughts, meaning, understanding, all that kind of very adult kind of stuff. So we could simplify it that, there's sensation, emotion, thought. And our brain is actually built in a bottom-up fashion, both in terms of our evolutionary history and in terms of our individual development throughout our childhood. The brain is built from the bottom up. So this is also called sometimes our reptilian brain because we have that in common with reptiles. This is sometimes called our mammalian brain and our human brain. That's a little unfair. Apes have this too, and several mammals do, but simplification sometimes. Another simplification. Chronologically in our own development, babies come fully wired. Their basal ganglia is fully on board. Their sensory processing mechanisms are ready even before they're born, whereas our frontal cortex doesn't fully develop, isn't fully finished developing until our early 20s. So both in terms of our evolutionary history and in terms of our own personal development, our brain is built from the bottom up. Why does that matter? Well, it matters because what that should already start to cue you into is that brain processing is happening before some of these upper structures are even online. So we would sort of be curious that is there some dominance or some level of hierarchy here? And in fact, it's been shown that while the body and the frontal cortex and the body, there is a two-way information exchange. There's a two-way highway. 80% of the information actually flows bottom up. So 80% of the traffic on that highway is flowing sensation, emotion, thought, and only 20% is going bottom down. So only 20% is our thoughts affecting our emotions and our sensations. 80% of the time, it's our sensations that are affecting our emotions and our thoughts. So while the information exchange goes both ways, there is a preferential processing order in the brain. And that can be interesting because, when we think about therapy or on what level of the brain do we want to therapize, which one do we want to help or support? And that's a false dichotomy. We should be helping all of them, but where should we be giving the majority of our attention? That can be interesting when it comes to therapy. There are therapies that are bottom-up type of therapies. They give a lot more attention and focus to what's happening on the lower levels, on our sensory and our somatic, our experiential levels, at the sensational level. They give a lot more attention to that than our thoughts, and vice versa. There are top-down kind of therapies. There are therapies that really focus on the thoughts and the meaning and what our brain, what our frontal cortex part of our brain is doing, and don't pay as much attention to what's happening at the bodily level. So both types of therapies and both kind of camps of therapy have tons of evidence behind them. They're super effective at different things. They're both very helpful. I tend to lean more towards the bottom-up types of therapies, largely because they tend to be more intuitive in some ways. And by intuitive, I mean they're respecting and working with the system's natural information processing. We're going with the flow of traffic as opposed to kind of going against it. If only 20% of the information is going top down, then using our thoughts to try to modify or control what's happening in our emotional centers or our sensory centers, can be a little bit of a losing battle, and that's often people's experience, right? With top-down therapies, it often feels like it's very effortful. They're really having to use willpower to move their way through these things, and it's because they're just not necessarily going with the flow of traffic, right? So certain types of therapies, somatic, sensory motor psychotherapy, somatic experiencing, they tend to work a lot more with the experience of these different mental phenomenon or psychological phenomenon, anxiety, depression, PTSD, all of that. They work with them more in terms of what's happening on the bodily level, and kind of go with the flow of traffic that way. It's not that we kind of don't think at all or don't give any attention to the thoughts, but we recognize that the body is a major player in that equation. And in fact, what's happening in the body will lead to what's happening on the more mental level and the thoughts. I heard a great analogy one time that trying to calm what's happening on the mental level without first attending to what's happening in the physiology on the body level is kind of like trying to stop a pot from boiling without first taking it off the heating element, right? It's really hard while the pot is still being heated to stop it from boiling. And similarly, if there's a lot of heat in the body, if there's a lot of cortisol, epinephrine, adrenaline, if there's a lot of tension and contraction, if there's our fight or flight responses, if there's all of that heat in the body, it's very hard to stop the mental smoke, the mental steam, all of that mental boiling that's happening. It's being fed from all of that heat in the body, and the mind is just sort of taking its cues from what's going on down there, right? So if we can, in contrast, if we can work to support, to aid, to help what's happening on the physical level, the thoughts can take their cue from that. We may not even have to interject at that level if we can stop what's happening down here. A lot of times what's happening down here is actually the root cause, right? That's the fire, and the thoughts are just the smoke. And sure, sometimes it's helpful to clear out the smoke so we can see and find our way through, but it's not a very sustainable strategy, right? If that's all we do, then we're always clearing smoke because we haven't attended to the fire. So that is why sometimes we might bring the body into therapy, why we might work with the felt sense of experiences, why these bottom-up type of therapies really bring that into the equation and try to honor that. And so hopefully that's kind of provides a little bit of insight if you're a therapist or someone's asking you what's going on or how that's being experienced, how that's being felt. And if you have questions, please put them in the comment section below, because while you may not be in my physical office. This is a little bit of a virtual office, and I would love to answer your questions. Other people probably have them too. So bring them up, let me know, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.